Insights people, welcome to episode number 89 of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the research and insights pros that you trust. I'm Matt Valley, and today's guest is Eric Dolan, who is the Director of Consumer and Business Intelligence at Johnson & Johnson's Global Health Division, which includes some of the trusted and iconic brands that you know, such as Johnson's Baby, Listerine, and Band-Aid, among others. Now, I first met Eric back when he was at P&G, and I was managing the global Procter business at GFK way back in the day. But back then I learned that Eric has this really great history of playing in super cool bands in the greater Boston area. Bands where they got this great pop, melodic, kind of catchy stuff with really cool beats. Lots of really good stuff in his catalog, which I've actually gone pretty deep on. So we're going to talk about all that and more on today's podcast. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to get a couple recent SoundCloud hits too. That'll be awesome. Thank you very much. Really fun to talk about, but glad to be here today. Super excited.
Yeah, awesome. Glad to have you. Well, you have certainly gotten some hits from me. I think the song Can't Hold On, I've got a few of those in there. I'm a big fan. Hitman is a good one too, but lots of good stuff.
Appreciate that, man.
Right on. So we're gonna chat that, but I like to start with research. So I know that you didn't start your career on the insight side of the business. So tell us how that came about and a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. I actually interestingly, I was on assignment and committed to go to the Peace Corps right after college without having much of a sense of what to, where my career direction was ultimately going to be headed. So the unfortunate intersected directly. That was in August of 2001. The next month was the first time they had called everybody back to the embassies. All the folks who were I was gonna be in Western Africa, I think, teaching English and digging water ditches, and that was still incredibly exciting, very, a little bit of a cold feet situation. So that led me to figure out what the hell I was going to do with myself. I was living in the Boston area at the time, ended up getting a job at a customer service job for a financial services company and worked there for about 2 years, essentially for beer money, but, trying to figure out what my next step or first step was going to look like. In hindsight, I have a hand-drawn picture of her behind me, but my wife and I were cube mates in that job. And while we never dated back then, we had mutual friends, and had it never been for that shitty first job at, and I won't even say the company's name. It was, I made it shitty. The job was great. The company was wonderful. But those jobs that don't necessarily always feel like they're a step at the time ended up being one that was a huge factor in my life. So that was, just wanted to, I guess, start with a little bit of a non-career story. And we now have 3 children together and have been all over the country with different companies and places. But at that point, I was really starting to, kind of get to the point where I wanted to have a focus in terms of where I was going to be harnessing a lot of that energy and career focus, and started on the supplier side, actually. So from 2003 until I went back to school in 2009, I started at a company with actually a guy from close to your neck of the woods. So General Mills had come back home to Boston and started a company called Brand IQ. There was 3 people at the time, including him. And I was the persistent applicant who was really interested and sparked to the people and the vibe of the company, and learned like proposal to presentation and everything in between, and caddy programming, and kind of a lot of the guts of, like, I guess, 90s market, or 2000s, early 2000s market research methodologies, which was an immersive experience. And then parlayed that, kind of had a great run there, and then spent a few years at Forrester research, doing a lot more of a service-based kind of syndicated research publication role, but also helping kind of craft that proactive message behind the research, and then converting that into consultative engagements with clients. So it was a totally different angle of like the volume and size and just kind of service model behind the work at that. And then I spent 2 years or so at a company called Cogent Research, which had a kind of emerging syndicated arm, but was mostly a custom research shop. And I would say it was kind of somewhere in between the 2 experiences I had on the supplier side. So a long way of saying those were pretty formative experiences, but I had no other real visibility to the work beyond the functional market research stuff. So I'll pause there. The next chapter was kind of going off to school and then switching to the client side and being kind of a function within a larger organization with the same type of view. So it's been a pretty long run, but yeah, didn't start there all at once.
And tell us about your current role at J&J.
Of course, yeah. So the current the function I'm in at J&J is called Consumer and Business Intelligence. We're part of a larger capability organization within the consumer organization called the Consumer Experience Organization. So includes folks like me in the kind of market research CBI function, as we call it, as well as a lot of our folks who are bringing our commercial teams to life every day through digital, kind of business activation through digital channels. Our advanced analytics teams, kind of all of our media partnerships and agencies are embedded in there somewhere. So there's a lot of different partnerships within our function, but we're primarily serving and acting as the voice of consumer and of our consumers, as well as all the advanced methods that we're using to analyze our market and competitive landscape these days as well.
Great.
But like you said in the beginning, well, consumer spans a lot of skin health and self-care brands across the world. My specific focus right now is on what we call essential health, and that includes our Listerine, our baby care businesses, so Johnson's Baby and Aveeno Baby, wound care, things like Band-Aid, and then women's health, so things like Stay Free and Carefree across the globe. We're managing those global franchises for the business today.
Wonderful, cool. And you referenced going to school, and I just want to ask about that real quickly because I know you went to the UW-Madison Nielsen School, and I had a chance years ago to speak at their summit event, and it was probably to this day the best research conference I've ever been to. There's something about that network. It's so congenial and so close.
And a lot of times people say Nielsen, I think, now connotates a lot more of the Nielsen organization, but that center specifically was started by the AC Nielsen foundation, the family of Mr. Nielsen, and they've maintained that tie directly. And certainly there's a lot of integration with the Nielsen, the Nielsen organization as well. But that family and that program was, I think, among one of the few first. I think University of Georgia and UT Austin. These were a few others that had market research kind of specializations in their MBA program. I think it's a lot more proliferated, a lot more universities now, but the caliber of the folks going through there and the client partner relationships have just made it such a great, it was a great experience as well as education. And for somebody that had no idea what I was in for in terms of just living in Wisconsin and in that part of the country for a few years, it was just a wonderful experience. We enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, excellent. So along the way, somewhere you picked up a guitar, you learned how to write songs and play some chords and sing a bit.
Yes.
Tell us about, and I mean, you were at this for a while, so tell us a little bit about your band days.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, yeah. I started playing guitar when I was 12 or 13, early 90s. So was, really drawn to not only the music of the time, but it seemed incredibly approachable in terms of being able to play, not know too much and play along with a Pearl Jam, Nirvana song, some of at least the easier ones. And so that was really my opening foray into it. I really stuck with guitar for probably the first decade. I could pick up other stringed instruments, but yeah, I played in high school bands and kind of started to hack around with my friends and kept with it though, stuck with it, always enjoyed writing songs and playing cover bands and things like that. But also, I think what I started to learn is just finding a small group of people where you had this kind of shared common thing that you could do, but also work toward and shape and build was, somewhere in there was the motivation that I think I started to discover as I kept going, at least keeping bands a part of my life. And I would never say it was ever the type of band where we were playing, 4 nights a week and really, looking to make it per se. But it was always, something where we, I'd say after college, we're in bands where we had separate space we would rent, and there would be a studio, kind of a studio per se. It would usually be the back of a mechanic's garage or something, after hours, but it would be something there would be a lease and there would be a lock in the door and we would have things we would keep there. So that would give it an air of seriousness, I guess. But yeah, throughout those years, we made sure to at least record and gig out enough to hold ourselves accountable to write and create and kind of have some kind of structure to all of it. So it felt like it was like I don't know, I guess a hobby a little bit, but a hobby that was we had some cadence and rhythm too, which was great.
Yeah, now let me ask you this, because I like your SoundCloud because you have the studio versions of your songs, but you have a lot of live recordings as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of energy and a lot of crowd interaction clearly in your live performances. I'm curious to know from your perspective, what do you identify more with? What do you connect more with, the live experience or studio?
Personally, there's the recorded experience, but I think the only reason I say it, it's funny you mentioned that we have one audio recording of a place called the Middle East in Cambridge for anybody in the New England area. I don't think it even exists anymore, but there was an upstairs and downstairs to it. And it had like, if bands were coming around who were playing clubs, they would typically play there, like bands you've heard of, Weezer, kind of like Red Hot Chili Peppers, or they would stop in and play like a Thursday there. So it was a really big show. And usually we didn't have, that was probably like the best show we ever played. And we got it on like this great audio recording. It's not on video, almost makes it a little bit more special, but typically our shows weren't so squeaky clean and pristine and they were fun. But I think through that also personally got when you're playing by yourself and recording, just a loop to riff over or something, that's recording, I guess, in a sense, but starting to get an actual like multi-track program in front of you and really understand it was some Adobe program we used to use back at the time. I can't remember. It wasn't Pro Tools. It was like more of a free version of that, but just the understanding of how the arrangement of a song came together. And there was some people in the shared studio space who had people who were really skilled at this and had gone to school for it to kind of really record and produce music. And I was fascinated by it because I think it made the ability to deliver something not necessarily contingent on how well you could pull it off like live and together in spot. And it was a craft in and of itself that I kind of learned through that, even though it was just little 4-song EP or something. Like just the experience of doing that, you approach it totally differently. And I think it made me appreciate the different parts of the music as opposed to just jamming along to people playing.
Yeah. Cool. So you've spent a lot of time in sort of two environments. I'm curious from your perspective, is there any overlap between the two, or is anything you've learned from one that you apply to the other, music versus your professional?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think there are two things that come to mind. The first was the sense of resonance. And the second was the ability to specialize, but also coordinate. So I think the resonance one is more like the gut feel of, I don't know, you kind of know if you got something or you don't. You kind of know if the melody you're doing all over this really kind of hits the feel that you're going for. And I think that there's a sense of that in probably many different arts and crafts and things that, I don't know, music is just for me, a sense of knowing when you got it, and kind of applying that standard, I think, to the quality and the how you're planning things in your life and work in any respect is really a function of how much you're putting into it. So I think knowing, even if what your best effort can look like, I think the complexity of doing it with music and just kind of knowing how unusual and how like critical it is for that harmony or the rhythm to kind of be consistent and on point is something that I guess I transfer more just in my bones and my gut of knowing like when it's there or not, or when it's done. But I think more day to day, even before you hit those kind of moments of being able to gel and really put together those magic moments of resonance, there's just the ability of like knowing your rudiments and knowing your kind of like basic structures and scales, and being able to bring 4 people into a room. And even if you're not going to be writing just beautiful original music right off the bat, like you could sit there and crank out like this sheet music if you had to together, because everybody knows how to play their role and they kind of know the boundaries and the kind of the overall plan here. So that piece of it too, I think, has been incredibly transferable, just to be able to recognize and celebrate what people are really great at and understand what that's going to complement the most, right? And like
Right.
where those are going to make the most sense given the circumstances and like situation around like whatever the project is, or song, I guess, in either setting.
Cool. Excellent. And we know one other thing is that you've got an incredibly adorable dog there that's very well behaved.
Yes,
I should steal a little of the
she's
camera.
a COVID dog, so she has a bit of a separation anxiety problem, but it's just with me.
It totally works. Beautiful dog.
Thank you.
So let's switch to research again here. So you've been at J&J for a while. You've been through COVID. And finally, I think that there's been an acceleration of change within the insight space. From your vantage point, what do you see the future looking like for consumer insights?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I thought of a lot of different ways to answer this question. I'm going to try not to laundry list or daisy chain too many of them together here. I thought that the one that kept rising to the top, though, was the mindset of the people who have been in market research a while, like you and me, and people who are starting to experience an influx of a lot of different types of people and skill sets and cross-functional partnerships that don't look like they remember the market research, world maybe
Absolutely.
5-10 years back. And so I think the idea of how can we use the same mindset that a market insights or analytics function is always used to train on the consumer. I'm finding that plus that same mindset internally, like understanding how we're communicating change, how that change is going to hit people in different parts of the organization, how that's going to, how strategic changes are going to come to life in different parts of the world where the markets and the, kind of maturity curves are way different.
Right.
But also I think more front and center for what we tend to see and hear a lot is how approachable and vulnerable and confident people feel as they approach kind of more the quantitative analytics side or the advanced analytics or the big data or the AI, kind of all the things that feel new. But the magic I found is oftentimes the same kind of curiosity and I guess method that you would go about putting together a quote unquote traditional or primary research project, a survey-based project, or even a qualitative engagement with consumers, is the same way that you tend to want to interrogate data and information at scale. And it's oftentimes like the equipment and the tools, right? And are a little bit too foreign in that I don't know how to ask. And the partners who I need to ask, I don't even know where to start. And I don't really work with IT that much, so I'm not really sure who to engage there. And I think the more and more we've been able to use that same mindset kind of internally to build the right partnerships and the right bridges between all the functions that have ultimately the consumer's best interests at heart and want to, kind of leverage all the ways that we can explore the landscape around us or internal landscape or what have you, I think are really enthusiastic and encouraged when they start to see those same threads, because they see a lot of what's made them excited about market research as opposed to what makes them excited about just consumer insights and analytics in general. So the more and more we've been able to integrate those and even put people, for an assignment over with like the hardcore, I'm cranking out like the monthly reports every month, no matter what type of groups, versus I'm going to go spend a week in a, kind of a mom, bunch of different moms' homes or shopping along with them and kind of understanding the real visceral parts of that consumer experience. Like those can be incredible, like sprints or even just stretch assignments to have that has made it incredibly, kind of valuable to be able to have people rediscover research a little bit, I think, throughout our function, like not just J&J, but specifically for us as well. We're going through, I think we mentioned before, J&J Consumer Health is going through a planned transition and spinoff with Johnson & Johnson overall. So we're also in a year of incredible change and redefinition of what that world is going to look like when we are primarily a consumer, kind of a consumer organization playing against our direct competitors as opposed to a sector within a larger organization. So as far as the degrees of freedom we have to kind of shape that future for the future of J&J Consumer, it's going to be an incredibly exciting experience for us this year too.
Yeah, very exciting. And I love that answer because it's not one that I have really heard yet on the podcast. And I just have a follow-up question to that.
I was worried if I was talking about advanced artificial intelligence types of answers that I might begin to go too far into my technophile mode and never really answer the question. So yes, but we could talk another podcast about that.
Okay, cool. But follow-up question on what you did share, because you started on the supplier side as you shared earlier. Given sort of these changes that you just articulated about this space, different roles and different people being involved, what sorts of implications do you see that for suppliers? Is there something that different expectations or different skill sets or capabilities, or how do you see that?
I think in terms of this types of market research suppliers, we would typically work with in a CPG organization. And I see it as much more. And there's always, I feel like part of it, I'm gonna answer in two ways. I think as people become more dexterous with the technical side of things and just become more comfortable with the ways to use different resources to interact or analyze data, naturally, a lot of the ways of having more self-directed access to consumers through platforms that just kind of allow you to quick test or do a quick A/B kind of overnight thing or screen for incidents on something. And I feel like that is there will be an increasing role and sense of self-sufficiency that will make kind of more DIY or self-service kind of platforms more prominent than they are today. I think where we're really trying to focus is on the types of work that we want to make fundamental for our global franchise brands, right? Neutrogena, Listerine, kind of Band-Aid, things that are coming to life in the same way across the world and have the same brand story and kind of brand, kind of brand communication that we want to give out to all these markets. Right. Is how do we really pick the right external strategic partners who aren't necessarily just vendors where you're running some kind of like form and saying, I got this concept test or claim screen or price architecture and I got this much money, and spits out like 3 that are going to be qualified partners for the job, right? Like those are the kinds that I feel like there will be always some of those, but we're really paying a lot more attention to who we want to have those kind of like strategic continuity with, and figuring out what those partnerships look like, and then being able to co-create with them and like kind of figure out how do we have this as more of a relationship as opposed to a vendor service type. So that's I'm not sure if that's advice or just necessarily more of a projection on where we are in our kind of engaging with the external landscape in that respect right now. Sure. But I am continuing to just be staggered with how many applications and just gadgets are becoming more and more prominent and prolific through a lot of the kind of chat GPT type plugins that we can start training on things, especially things that we know very clearly, like the boundaries of, or just sales data, or this 10 years of these ANU studies. Those types of things I'm really excited about, and those types of vendors, I feel like my own limitations are the biggest hurdle right now, because I can kind of envision the types of things that we could definitely do. Like if we're doing the things we can see on, the demonstrations and the things that are released in the world today, the types of ways we can start using existing knowledge and remining it, or looking at the number of different permutations of things that we could start exploring in all new ways, I feel like are right in front of us right now. And so the other side of that coin, I guess, is really digging in with the partners who are going to be our strategic kind of guidance, but also really starting to explore the ones who we aren't even familiar with yet, and are going to start to open up some of these new opportunities for us in how we use that information about our markets and customers around the world.
Super cool. So I know you're a very busy person, Eric, obviously by virtue of your role and 3 kids and all that good stuff.
3 guitars on the wall back here. I got some guitars on the wall,
and learning to play the drums at the same time as well. So
yeah, I've never played on an acoustic kit. I only have electric. I've only played on V drums. So like I'm probably not even as good of a drummer as I think I am, or at least like intermediate as I think I am.
It's like mono and stereo, right? So it's
one day I'll build a little room for myself and cave myself off. Yes.
All right, cool. So with that limited time you have available, obviously everybody consumes some media. What do you turn to for inspiration, insight, or enjoyment? Big broad question.
Oh, just type of media. I think playing music is still a big part of my life. So we have in my garage is a lot less organized, but a lot kind of a litany of different instruments and old gear and things that we've just collected over the years. So my kids are all either, maybe not as it's like haven't found like they don't all have music. They're really great at music. I don't know if it's going to be something they like are passionate about yet, but they all are able to play and we're all able to have a great time doing it together. So that's a huge part of my life still. I'm actually an avid, we got a dog over COVID. So I grew up with big giant dogs, and I'm not only excited about all the things that the dog brings to the family, but it's forced me to go on a lot more walks and just be out a lot more. And I find myself listening to a lot more audiobooks. So I think audiobooks and kind of just podcasts in general have been like a huge way that I've consumed most of the media I have in my free time, but also just daily listening type of stuff as well. I got to say, music discovery is a place that I feel like I'm oftentimes like a little deficient in, and then I'm getting into my own Spotify algorithm loops, and I'm constantly looking for new ways to find music discovery engines that feel like they replicate my favorite college radio stations, or bring me some things that I really feel grateful to have discovered. But every now and then, I maybe have to get better at training my own algorithms a little bit too. But those are some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah, it's a different game. So for me, it's my daughter. She's big into music discovery now, and so she turns up these bands. She's like going to concerts all the time, and I wouldn't know about all these things if it wasn't for her.
That's exactly. I can't. I think I'm getting a little bit of it, but it's just the tastes I think haven't quite intersected as much. So perhaps the ones that they know I don't, but it's not. I'm not yearning to. So we'll see. Maybe in the future it'll change.
All right, super cool. Well, I'm really excited to ask this question because I have no idea what the answer is to, and I'm extremely curious. Having heard, a good chunk of your creative output, I'm very curious to hear what this answer is. So let's say, Eric, you're stranded on a desert island, right? You've got 3 records of your choosing to keep you company for the rest of your days. What are they?
Okay. The 3 would be Smashing Pumpkins, Simon's Dream.
Yes.
Jimi Hendrix, Axis Bold as Love.
Yes.
And would be, these are, I don't have any deep cuts for people. The other one would be Radiohead. And I first wrote down OK Computer, but then I was thinking Desert Island, and I would probably need In Rainbows more to keep me a little bit more sane, I think. But those 3 have been huge influences in terms of just playing style. And I think the intricacies of how much you can bring to a song, either live or in the studio. So it was tough to start calling it down to something I would sum it up with, but it would be those.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now I'm thinking back about your music, and I'm kind of reconciling some of that. And I can, for all 3 of them, I can see where it's coming from a little bit. So that's
appreciate that, man. That means a lot. Thank you so much.
Super cool. Well, Eric, this has been a great chat. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we had a chance to get mic to mic on this and talk this stuff through. I've really enjoyed experiencing your music, so I appreciate that as well. So let's stay in touch, talk soon, and rock and roll.
Thank you so much, Matt.